Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, January 19th, 2018 is called to order. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Anderson, Mr. David.
Present.
Mr. Jessic, Mr. Mahoney, Mr. LaSalle.
Here.
Mr. McEnroe.
Here.
Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Tong.
Here.
Okay. We have an announcement that Lisa has been promoted to the assistant to the city manager.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Well deserved, I might add.
Yeah.
Can we change your sign to where it's there so you're
I
not?
have a new one on order.
Oh.
It's just not there. Yes.
Okay, approval of the minutes of May 15th, 2018. Does anybody have any corrections or additions to those minutes? Everybody in approval, say aye.
Aye. Abstain.
Abstain, Jonathan abstained. Agenda analysis. Does anybody have anything they want to add to this evening's agenda? Item 3, citizen comments. Don't have any citizens here, so obviously we don't have any comments. Item 5, new business discussion items. 5A, safe routes to schools discussion with Wes Rogers. Please come forward, Wes.
Wes and I didn't get a chance to really talk through this discussion, but it is a discussion. So we've talked to Wes a little bit about some improvements. We've agreed that the Gardner Middle School is kind of a focus area, someplace where we've been kind of interested in as well. And with their new school change plans in the works, we thought maybe we start there, and we've talked about some other areas around the area, around the school district in Oregon City, but other than that, we really didn't talk too much, so we haven't compared notes. So I guess we'll just see what Wes brings, and we'll try and fill in the blanks if there's any.
Okay, great.
Technology question. Our buttons in our boardroom, they're lit. Is this just
It
making
should be lit.
Okay.
Sometimes they look a little dark, but I just.
Okay, that's fine. Yep, I think I hear myself.
Okay.
Well, thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm Wes Rogers, Director of Operations for Oregon City School District. And I'm happy to be here to talk a little bit about safe routes to school. We've done several projects over the years. I've been with the district for 30 plus years, and I remember several projects that we've done and have made some improvements to some of our facilities. One specifically at the Oregon City High School campus on Beaver Creek Road. We did some safe routes to school work there. And then I believe one of our elementary schools got involved and did some work. I'm not sure that it got finished up, but I remember hearing about it. And currently, the district, I've been to the commission meeting and the plan commission meeting, have talked about the district's plan for a November construction bond for school facilities. And we still have on our list of project scope replacing Gardner Middle School. And I think that's pretty high on our list. And I think John and I have been talking about the impacts that would have on the area, both temporarily and permanently, but also about finding ways that, since we've got a fairly robust construction budget for that site, we'd have the ability to do some off-site improvements, as well as make sure that our facility layout on the property kind of matches where the entry points are to the facility. And at the same time, we're quite aware that there's a public safety building that's going to be built in the area soon. Our middle school would probably come online in the fall of 2022. So not too far off from that, the public safety building, there'll be some more activity in the area. Seems like a good place to maybe take a really hard look at doing some work for safe routes to school, and try to encourage as many as possible, as many students to walk to school or bike to school or skate to school. And because of being able to get all the way from their house to the school in a safe manner on safe sidewalks and pathways. So think we're still very committed to it. I've chatted with the principal just informally here before the end of the school year. He's very interested in participating in it. We have a very active green team student group at Gardner Middle School they do some environmental things on campus. I think they would be very interested in assisting the school in doing some of the survey work and some of the other things that have to be done. So I think because we've got a student group that I think would be a good match, we've got a school administrator who's very eager to do the project. We're going to have some capital funds to do some things in the next couple of years. I think, and it's our largest city school besides Oregon City High School, the largest one towards the core. So it makes a lot of sense to try and get as many kids as possible to walk to school and make it easy for them. So we're really, really very pleased to make that part of our project of replacing Gardner Middle School and make sure that we promote that accordingly. So
I have a question that's probably for both John and...
Sure. John made a lot of promises, and I haven't gotten to all those, but later.
He probably hit on this one then, because I know he's aware of it, but your traffic pattern off of Lynn Avenue to Gardner School shows, when I've been through there at morning time and afternoon time, indicates to me that there needs to be some improvement with their Lynn Avenue intersections there.
Definitely.
To allow people to get out of the school area.
Well, one of the key things in the facility layout of a new facility is to separate. I'm sure you realize we have one entrance into the school. So we have buses and parents accessing the same entrance. That's not a good thing for safety as well as just congestion. So our new initial layout, just kind of very preliminary, has a very much separated on different sides of the property bus entrance and exit, and then parent and public entrance and exit.
Is that going to require any new crossroads?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we'll be
and-
doing a pretty in-depth transportation study. We did a transportation study that started as part of our modular building, sixth grade modular building a few years back. So we'll be updating that, I'm sure. We'll also have more current traffic counts of how many parents are accessing school in a private vehicle versus a bus or walking. Hopefully Safe Routes will help reduce that number a bit. But that's one of our key safety strategies from a physical layout standpoint, is to separate bus and parent traffic. I'm not sure that we can build enough capacity internally on site to queue enough cars that possibly could enter the facility. But I'm sure that's going to come up in our transportation study about how I'm very much aware that we're queuing traffic out onto Lynn Avenue. So that's 3 blocks of traffic. Actually, it's probably more like 4 blocks of traffic, because once you get into the facility currently, you have about a block length of queuing lanes on site. So that plus, I think, 3 blocks does Lynn then? Once you hit the property line? So it's about 4, so it's significant.
And as I remember the Lynn Avenue studies that we did, the city did, that Elmira and Lynn Avenue is a highly stressed intersection.
Which one?
Elmira.
Is that the one with Elmira? There's A.B. Davis. Does that?
It's the one by the, I want to say it's Pad Pantry. Pad Pantry store.
Okay.
And if you go up the hill and you turn right, you can get off onto South End Road pretty easily. If you go to the left, you're going into Gardner, and so everybody from South End comes down, hits Elmira, crosses Lynn Avenue with no stop sign for Lynn, and goes into, because that's also the one-way access that Gardner's kind of promoting for the school.
Yeah.
But that's a one-way out there.
One way out is, the out is over by Warner Milner, Warner Parrott, up by the traffic signal.
Wow, you really
think
got
the
me
one-
turned around, Henry.
I think the one closest to Warner Milne is the entrance road.
Oh, okay. Well, I keep seeing people stacked up.
Yeah, because they're stacked up to drop their kids off.
Yeah, and I'm making the
That's why they get
assumption
stacked up.
that's,
Yeah, and that's because, school starts at the same time. So in the mornings, you typically queue a few more cars than you will in the afternoons, because afternoons are kind of spread out with people. And we have a pretty robust after-school program at the school, so not all kids are going home at the same time either. We recently purchased a piece of property it's right next to the Presbyterian Church. It was a empty lot that was for sale for a while. We've acquired that lot now, and we now have 3 pieces of property. So we can do a 3 driveway approach into the facility now, which our architects tell us is going to be really crucial to trying to reduce our impacts in the neighborhood and so forth. So that's, I think, something we're trying to mitigate by purchasing some extra property as well. But yeah, we're keenly aware of that, and I hate to say it, most of our schools are doing the same thing, and whether they're Redland and Beaver Creek Elementaries out in the country or schools in the city, it surprises me the number of people here in the city who drive their kids to school, and it's only about 10, 12 blocks. But, yeah.
John, I'm not familiar with how complete your sidewalk inventory is, but I want to congratulate the school district on being really engaged in this Safe Routes to School program. If we could get an inventory and maybe some maps, because it sounds like you have volunteers that would go out and survey and identify the missing links in the pedestrian system to make connections within the school, within a mile buffer of the school, because that's where the busing starts, is the 1 mile limit.
Actually, for a middle school, it's a mile and a half.
Oh, so if we
unless there's a safety corridor issue.
Okay. Yeah, and if we identified those missing links, and you have the legs, and you have the GIS ability to provide them with maybe some maps to go out and say, we got missing links here, that might be a way of identifying funding projects and identifying those short links immediately that could be completed to provide those linkages for a complete system to the school. And I want to congratulate, I've worked with school districts, and they're often not interested, and I want to congratulate your school district.
It'd be a much easier lift if we weren't replacing Gardner School, to be quite honest with you. But because we are replacing it, and it is a school that's fairly active around issues of, global warming,
and you're centrally
green
located.
projects and stuff.
You're to the neighborhoods, which often schools are in the boondocks, so
yeah, and that's
a
another
really
reason
good thing.
we really want to make sure that when we do this school, and we call it our one still existing core school, we really want to do it right and want to be compatible in the neighborhood, but also we want people to be able to walk to and from this site, because it's also, the initial designs are it's going to be a community hub for youth sports and just walking the track or using the field and so forth. So
I don't know how complete or incomplete the sidewalk or pedestrian inventory is.
Right, so that's a really good point. I would say our sidewalk inventory is complete. We've got good access to that information through our GIS, and I think it's available to the public as well. So we've got a good inventory for that already, so we can connect the dots pretty easily.
Oh, that's great.
I think what I'm wondering about is, for one, we've heard from the Transportation Advisory Committee a lot of willingness to participate. Safe Routes is often about projects, but it's also about education, right? And trying to get the parent communities to think about it before they drive the 10 blocks to pick up and drop their students, right? And think more about walking and biking to work or to school. So I guess I'm Bob, maybe you need to help me there a little bit, and just I'm assuming that someone on this committee could participate in this whatever process the school puts together, and I think that would be helpful.
yeah.
And then the other thing is just the timeline for this new school is 2022. Is there something we could do, kick off? I mean, is there a timeline shorter than that you'd feel comfortable with, kind of getting that principal together with it's not PTA anymore, it's the,
Some of them are
PTA,
still, parent advisory committees.
Yeah, parent advisory committees and that student committee. I know it's summertime, but if we actually started working on something so that we could, I think the capital piece, it's the costly piece, but it's usually kind of almost the end of the process, right? You get through a fair amount of an education campaign, and you go through kind of the state's Safe Routes to School guideline, and then out of that comes probably some project recommendations.
Yeah.
And that would be good for us to know if that's something you guys are ready for, and maybe in this next school year, or?
I definitely think because we have the principal on board, I think he can recruit somebody for us. I know on staff, we have an advisor to this green team of group of students. And I know they do have a pretty active parent group. And so it's a matter, I think, of finding a parent who would really like to be involved in that. And then if we have somebody from the Transportation Advisory Committee from the city, and that'd be great. And I think we could start it up this fall for sure.
Okay.
And start planning on it, maybe do a planning or two meeting in August. And
One project I've seen that's been fairly successful at other schools, and you have a green team, which is very beneficial. I don't know if you considered walking school buses, where you have the parents.
yeah,
Because a lot
Yeah.
of times the parents,
Yep.
they drive their
Sure.
kids because they're not comfortable.
sure.
So walking school bus is a way of
Definitely a tool
alleviating
that we can
fear.
take a look at. Yeah, for sure.
But you need more than one parent because they
Yeah.
get sick, and
Yeah.
as soon as it fails one day, the whole program
Yeah.
shuts down.
Yeah, that's definitely something that could work. I think that would help alleviate some of the safety concerns of some parents about putting their students out on the sidewalks and walking to school. It's not always about the pathway as it is so much of just letting, and these are middle school students, so you do have some sixth graders who are younger students, but then you have eighth graders who are not. There's a lot of difference between a sixth grader and an eighth grader. So it could be creating those kinds of walking assistance tools, like a school bus, or having people just go out on their local sidewalk in the mornings and just be there for kids to see and know, that's somebody from the school district or from the neighborhood who's here just to keep an eye out for us and stuff. So, but yeah, definitely I don't remember seeing anything about Safe Routes to School that made me think, oh, we could do that. I think everything I've seen so far is we would consider and see if that would work in our neighborhood. So
You need a local champion to
Yeah.
really make that work.
yeah, and I know that we've got some good supports. I think the city's very interested. We're very interested. I know we've got a state person, Dana. Is that your?
Oh, Dana Webb, yeah.
Yeah, Dana's
She's-
great. She works with the city, works for the city. So I think we've got the right people. It's the volunteers now that we need to fill out the roster. And they're going to be the ones to make it or break it, because my saying to a parent, hey, walk your kid to school. Well, you're a school person, and so we'll take that under advice. But if it's another parent who says, hey, I think we should do something about getting our kids to walk more and do that during the school year and stuff, I think that has a lot more emotion and motivation behind it. So, but yeah, that's a good point. One of the tools we can look at.
Has the school or anybody ever sent a questionnaire home as to questioning why people are delivering their kids rather than them walking or anything?
Not specifically to Oregon City. There's some national data on that, but for specifically Oregon City, we've never done a survey like that. Probably could be one of the questions on Safe Routes.
I was going to say, it seems like something that might be like first couple of days of school or something to kind
Oh
of
yeah, we have back to school nights. A lot of things are happening in early September that we can piggyback
PTAs
on.
or something,
Sure.
because I can think of several reasons why they might be doing it. Like,
Sure.
well, I'm going to work and it's easy to drop the kid off.
That's true too. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that a lot of the parents too drive and pick up their children with an attitude of fear for their children.
Yeah, safety concerns.
Yeah,
for sure.
because I know that, at least in my traveling around everywhere, that there is a bus drop-off point, there's always a whole bunch of parents standing there or waiting with their cars
Correct.
to
That's true.
pick up their children or walk the children down the street.
That's true. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
You've got a plan to put a new middle school out by Holcomb Elementary?
That's a longer term plan, but that's correct. Yeah, we're in the process of trying to acquire the property, and quite a bit of heavy lifting that needs to go on with Metro and getting it into the UGB, because currently it's not inside the
Yeah.
UGB. And so we've started those discussions with Metro, and if it does turn out that we can get in the UGB, then there's the whole annexation process with the city. as well as just master planning a middle school site.
Well, the reason I
Takes a fair amount of time.
thought about that was your statement about with Gardner, there's only one way in or out.
Yeah.
It's the same
Well, the
thing
nice thing
right
about
there.
that is we would stretch school property from Holcomb Boulevard to Forsyth, and we would have multiple, and we have another, is it Ames? I don't want to say Ames, but is it Ames?
Ames.
And then we got Ames there as well. So
Yeah.
we have another 3 ways to get in and out of the property.
Are you
So-
talking essentially taking that property along that new subdivision, pushing it down? It's Ceres Farm all the way down to.
Yeah,
to
we
Forsyth.
wouldn't, we have we've been very public about the fact we have a right of first refusal on the farmland, not the nursery structures.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
just
yeah, the
your
farmland.
school kind of runs right
Yep.
down that.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah. If you think
farmland.
about the farmland, he grows corn and other annual crops in there. It's from that Forsyth Road all the way to the Holcomb Elementary School site. And Holcomb Elementary School actually was Sears family property before the school district bought it. So, yeah, we would own that entire stretch between Holcomb and Forsyth, all the way across. So. And we do the same thing there. When we get into construction, I'm sure we would be very open to doing a safe routes to school process there, study it, make sure what do we have, what do we need, what tools will work here, what was our experience at Gardner. You have a little bit more challenge there just because of topography and slope and those kinds of things, but you still are going to see a lot of students a lot of homes are going to be built in that area over the next 5 to 10 years. And so I think there could be a possibility of developing some major pathways for students to get to the school and back.
Have you done any coordination with the North Clackamas School District in regard to implementing the safe routes to school?
I know that Dana and then the workshop that we all attended together, there was, I think we've got their contact information. They've done quite a few projects, and so we would definitely be tapping their expertise as well. Yeah, we're well connected at the staff level with North Clackamas School District.
Well, if they're like me, if somebody else has a good idea,
Yeah.
I sure will steal it in the
Yeah.
blink of an eye.
All I need to do is tweak it 5%. That's great. That's a good value. So yeah, we do share ideas back and forth. So it definitely will be in touch with them.
Good.
And you guys understand that city that the grant money is out there, but you guys kind of have to push that boundary.
Yeah, we're the key cog in the wheel. I mean, I see us as we are the agency. The school district is the one who has to kind of make it happen and has to be committed to making it happen. And I think we have a principal who's ready to do that. These are the kinds of things he sees as learning experiences for middle school students because of the process of all the things they get to do. They can integrate that into their learning plans and so forth. So it's a win-win all the way around. And he really wants his current school and when we replace Gardner, the new school, to be connected to the neighborhood. That's really a big priority for the school district. We don't want to build a school and then say, stay away. We'd rather build a school and say, we want you to be part of the neighborhood. With, of course, appropriate safety and security guidelines that we have to have in place, but otherwise, we really want to be part of the neighborhood. So, I'm excited that we have a principal, and if we didn't have a principal who was terribly excited, we probably still could convince them to let us come alongside and provide some extra support. But I really think he and a couple of staff members will be pretty motivated and will be excited about the opportunity. So,
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, is there a connection between Safe Routes to School and the family-friendly routes program?
No, I mean, I think the family-friendly routes were more about connecting places of interest, right? So school would be a place of interest. So there's some that lend themselves to that, but not all the family-friendly routes are necessarily connected to a school. So it's more of it's like a road classification. So it's kind of like a family-friendly route for us meant maybe there's a park connection, but not necessarily a school. So that doesn't lend itself well to safe routes to school, but.
But it might with Gardner, where it's so centrally located, and Wes mentioned, the fields that they're going to have. It seems like that would be a natural destination of both a safe route to school and a family.
Right, in fact, we're going to talk about our, well, it's the 20 mile per hour, but that's got that element of family friendly in it. And there's, Bell Court is right in the vicinity. And so I'm going to talk more about that later, but you're right, there's a family friendly corridor right near Gardner School. What's not designated in, well, we'll see the map. We can take another look at that, but I'm trying to remember if any of those side streets that connect to Gardner are in our family-friendly corridor. So, well, we have a slide presentation that has the map, and we'll take a look at it then.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, Wes, thank you very much.
Oh, glad to be here.
I'm pleased that this school district is getting going on this.
Yeah, we're excited. We'll be, probably looks like we'll be on the ballot in November, and we will have proceeds hopefully by January 1st. So as far as having some funding for doing some things next year in 2019, I think that's possible, probable.
Well, if there's anything this committee can do to help you, let us know.
Well, I don't, I would definitely tell you to vote, and we hope you would give strong consideration to supporting our proposal. That's about as close as I can come. So, but yeah, we're excited, and we're excited. We're working with the city on a couple of other projects, and so we're just excited to further develop that relationship and see the community continue to grow and develop and be a place that people want to live and stay when they want to do things and not leave the community to go do things. So we're excited for that. And John has my contact information. If you got any follow-up questions or anything, if you could funnel those through him. And then I'm sure Dana, we actually exchanged emails today. And I'm sure she's going to be scheduling a meeting with me here soon, and we'll start putting together our timeline and starting to fill in some of the blanks about people and due dates and so forth. So pretty excited about it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 5B, the equitable housing presentation by Pete Walter.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Pete Walter. I'm a planner with Community Development Department. I've been a planner in community development now for almost 14 years. And this is the first time that I've managed a project of this scope that is actually geared towards housing. So my intent this evening is to give you a brief overview of our project, which we call it the Equitable Housing Policy Project. We applied to Metro for a grant to support this project about 2 years ago. And we have been working with a project advisory team of 15 members who are all, with the exception of one, all are Oregon City residents from various walks of life. We have people from the Planning Commission, City Commission. We have renters. We have single-family home up. And we have people who represent communities of color and low-income groups as well. And in order for us to qualify for this grant, we had to meet certain criteria. So I'm not going to go into what those criteria were, but our grant information and all of the information associated with that is on our website, which I'll give you the website at the end of this. I have a short presentation, 13 slides, and I do have some additional pictures at the end to show you kind of housing unit types if there are any questions about them. So I'll just launch into it. It is a city commission goal and priority to address equitable housing as well as the homeless issue. What this project is really looking at is looking at our development code and taking a broad view of our development code and trying to reduce barriers to more diverse types of housing in our existing zoning designations. And what we're looking at as a long-term goal is diverse, quality, physically accessible, affordable housing choices with access to opportunities, services, and amenities. So this is really a question of housing supply. And there's a huge part of this issue which we can't address through this project, but which we are coming to terms with as we move through the project. And I'm going to talk about that at the end of this. So we're looking at providing more types of housing choices to both buy and rent. Those would be accessible to the entire range of Oregon City residents, present and future. And they need to be convenient. So they need to be close to transit, close to schools, amenities, childcare, food, services, and that kinds of thing. So the basic problem is that we have a lack of housing that addresses all Oregon City residents' needs. And what we're seeing is, as a result of that, some people on the bottom end of the economic spectrum tend to drop off, and some of them can become homeless, even if they're working. And what this project aims to do is try to support housing growth by removing regulatory barriers to facilitate the development of more types of housing. And the type of housing that we're talking about is, we call this the missing middle. This is housing that's affordable to people who make moderate incomes who want to work in this community. They're not necessarily people that can buy a home first time around when they're young or graduate from college. But I'll go into more of what our existing house stock looks like. This is a slide that we've shown multiple groups. It shows what our current housing stock is. To a large extent, it's dominated by single-family residential homes, single-family detached residential homes. And this is not unusual. This is a pattern of development that you see in many, many cities. It's based on the fact that we're a suburban city. We developed, on the outskirts of the metro area, and it's natural that this was a place where people chose to live and work, and so that's been our housing. But we also have neighborhoods which have pretty good diversity. You can think of the McLaughlin neighborhood and various other neighborhoods where over the years those neighborhoods have diversified for one reason or other, whether it was after the war or whatever. We see a lot of diversity in the older neighborhoods as well. And that kind of diversity and choice is kind of what we're shooting for. It's going to be driven by the market if people choose to develop new types of housing that will be largely based on individual owner's choice. So as you can see on this chart, our next biggest category is our multifamily housing, followed by manufactured homes and what we call multiplex, which is 3 to 4 attached units, duplexes, and townhouses. When we looked at the census data, this is what we found. We're considering households' cost burden if they're paying more than 35% of their income in housing. And for Oregon City, that includes a breakdown for homeowners with a mortgage of about 24% or 1,600 households. That was with a mortgage. Without a mortgage, it's about 10%, 170 households. Renters make up another 40%, 1,600 households, and then combined citywide, 27% of the population is considered to be cost burdened in terms of housing choices. This chart illustrates our existing residential zone districts. The housing types along the left column here, the ones that are in black represent housing types that are already permitted uses in these various zones. And in orange are the proposed unit types that would be permitted in these zones if these proposals go forward and are adopted in full by the city council, city commission, sorry. We have, as you see, R10, R8, and R6. Those mean 10,000 square foot lot minimums, 8,000 square foot lot minimums, and 6,000 square foot lots. Those are considered low density residential zones. And then we have the R5 and R3.5. That's 5,000 square foot lots and 3,500 square foot lots. those are considered medium-density residential zones. And you can see that in the majority of those zones, single-family is the principal permitted use. We have allowed accessory dwelling units since 2004 as a permitted use. And there's approximately 9,000 housing units that fall into these zone districts, 9,000 that are permitted to do this. We have seen approximately 26 ADUs built in all of that time, just to give you an idea of how many people are actually taking advantage of these. So why is that? Why haven't we not seen that kind of accessory dwelling unit growth? And there's a number of reasons for that we've heard about. What we're aiming to do through this project is to facilitate, through the development review process, educational materials for people to understand what they might be facing in terms of costs, so that they can do a cost-benefit analysis to figure out if this is going to work for them if they wanted to build one of these types of units. The next type of unit that we haven't seen built yet is cottage housing. Cottage housing allows you to double your density in existing zones by building very small footprint type cottages, as long as you have at least 2 acres of land. And it's a very prescriptive type of development code because it restricts the maximum building size as well as has certain open space and common maintenance requirements. So we've seen one project, we just approved it, has preliminary land use approval in the Kenema neighborhood. And I don't know when they're going to start building that, but that's for 5 units.
You're saying that you have to have a minimum,
2 acres.
well, why not acre?
Well, that's a great point. I think part of it is because there's an open space requirement for these types of developments, which could be met on a smaller scale. But it's something that we could certainly contemplate. At least 50% of the cottage housing units have to abut a central open space and have shared maintenance and that kind of thing. And some of the other concerns I've heard from builders is that the building footprints are not, the required building footprint maximums are not large enough for them to make a profit.
Okay.
So that's something we've heard. I don't know if that's the case. You know, this housing model comes from the Puget Sound, where there's a little more money floating around. You know, it's something we put in the code as an option. We're going to keep it as an option, but we're going to simplify the code for that. So it's called cluster housing now. Internal conversions, the idea behind internal conversions is that you keep your existing house. We don't want to incentivize scraping off a house to build some big house. This is the problem you've seen in Portland. So an internal conversion would essentially allow you to put a unit inside your house that would be bigger than accessory dwelling units in size, because an accessory dwelling unit has a maximum size of 40% of your existing living area. So, you know, that usually pencils out to about 600 square feet, 800 square feet maximum. And some people want more than that. And that's an option. You'll notice that that is an option in all of the residential zones. The way we looked at this is about half of the housing stock in the city was built before 1990, and about the other half was built after 1990. So we are saying that homes that were constructed before 1990 would be eligible for this, and after 1990 they would not. But that's something that we can talk about as we go through the process and the idea. Corner duplexes is a very common proposal that you're seeing. The idea is that you would allow corner duplexes on a slightly larger lot. Would owners take advantage of this in existing neighborhoods? I don't know. This is probably something that you would see in new subdivisions if it's a bigger lot. Yeah.
I would add that when I worked in Springfield about 30 years ago, this was pretty much standard in all of the subdivisions in the city, and they pretty much used a normal corner lot for them.
Yeah, that's a really important consideration. We're talking about having the lot be at least 25% larger to accommodate this. But if it was a standard lot, there'd be a design standard that goes with it to make it sure that it looked like a single-family home with entrances onto both the abutting streets, that kind of thing. The next three duplexes, townhomes, live works. The only real change here is that we would be permitting potentially these units in the R5 zone and bringing back townhomes and live work units to the R3.5 zone as well.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
if you're talking about diversity, why wouldn't you allow for multifamily or some of these other things in R8 and R10?
Yeah.
You're creating those neighborhoods. I mean, if somebody comes and acquires 50 acres or 300 acres and they're going to go R10,
Yeah.
you're not creating any diversity there.
Well, what we've talked about is, we want this project to succeed. We want to make sure that we respect existing neighborhoods to the extent that it's reasonable. One of the new concepts coming out of this, currently a multifamily project is defined as 3 units or more on a single parcel. That definition would change so it would be 5 or more, and then multiplex, which is a new category, would be 3 to 4 units on a single parcel, and that is a new use that we would look at permitting in the R5 and R3.5 category, but not the R10 and R8 and R6. There's various reasons why that proposal is going forward, but if these existing low-density zones already have the opportunity to do internal conversions and ADUs, and we've already got, and that's an infill area. So we're talking about existing city limits. That seems to be a way to accommodate that compatibility. I understand that, you could be super ambitious and try to go with something like, we're going to convert Oregon City over the long term to something that looked like Montreal or, like a really attached high density housing, which, that seems to work in cities, but I don't think Oregon City is ready for that yet. I honestly don't.
It's just a question. I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, and there's some justification to it from a transportation standpoint as well. There's multiple impacts that we need to look at in terms of traffic, and I'll talk about that.
Are there limitations to the number of these types of units in a zone?
Yeah, I mean,
do you put limits on how many duplexes are in a particular neighborhood?
yeah, all of these have dimensional requirements associated with them, which I'm not going to go into, but
Sure.
you have to have a minimum amount of land for each type of unit. You have to meet certain setback requirements and that kind of thing. For the R2 zone, which I'll talk about later. So all these require that you have a minimum square footage for a unit.
That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in an existing neighborhood, you can only have, 30% duplexes compared to single family.
Oh, I see. As a range of
Right.
density over an acre and that sort of thing. That's something we talked about. Right now, we have, a unit per square foot calculation in the code. We haven't moved towards regulating the area based on units per acre. Some cities do that. And it can really help in terms of diversifying and allowing flexibility within a particular area. That may be an option that we look at for our larger UGB areas where there's more land involved,
Sure.
like Beaver Creek Road or Park Place or South End. We're not contemplating that with this yet. The idea behind this proposal is rather than having all these zones in different chapters in the zoning code, we'll keep these designations, R10, R8, R5, but we're going to have a low density chapter, a medium density chapter, and a high density chapter for residential. And then we'll have our mixed use and commercial areas as well, which I was going to talk about. Final category in this chart is manufactured home parks. All of our manufactured home parks currently are zoned R3.5 and are not a permitted use in the R3.5 zone. So they're considered pre-existing non-conforming uses. This would change that, make them allow them as a permitted use, and allow them to expand and maybe add a few more units with design standards, rather than through a standard land use process, rather than going through a conditional use process, which is what they would have to do now in order to make any changes. Pretty big process for somebody who just wants to add a couple of manufactured homes. And there's certainly land in these parks that could accommodate a few additional units with this. We don't anticipate there would be any new manufactured home parks developed in the R3.5 zone just because the market prefers other unit types. But it could happen. And we'll have a set of manufactured home park design standards that go along with these. In the long term, I just want to reemphasize that we're not changing the zoning map with this project. We're talking about the existing zones. If we do, through a separate process, amend our zoning map to have new types of zones, such as manufactured park zones, we used to have a zone like that, not anymore, or different types of zones with different minimum lot sizes, we would be doing that through a separate process. So these are the big ideas. Expanding missing middle housing in our low and medium density zones. Expand our housing types in our high density zones, that's the R2 zone, multifamily zone. Continue to allow multifamily in our commercial and mixed use zones. That's a permitted use. Basically, what we're talking about as far as design standards is consolidating design standards for each unit type and making them simpler to understand, and providing maps and educational resources so that somebody can come in, even if they're just a homeowner and they want to be their own contractor, they can pick up a packet including a fee estimating worksheet and a very simply written guide packet to say, this is what it's going to take for me to build one of these unit types. As far as the other zones, which I won't go into a whole lot of detail where they are in the city, but we have R2 zone, which is our multifamily zone. Currently, this zone only allows multifamily, which is 3 or more units of attached housing with a site plan and design review process. As long as we're getting the density in this zone for needed housing, we would like to expand the types of units that are buildable in that zone to include townhomes and potentially other unit types. So you could do triplexes, townhomes, multifamily on a parcel. Let's say you had a parcel about 10 acres, then you could do a real mixture of units in that. And we want to make sure with that proposal that you're not squeezing out apartments. We had concerns about that in the past. So one of our concerns is that if we allow multiple unit types or other unit types in the R2 zone, suddenly there's no apartments built in Oregon City, and that has an effect on affordability. So we'll be careful as we go through the Planning Commission and City Commission process. But if there's an affordability component to a project where somebody wants to have affordable units, which would be affordable to 80% median family income or less, we would offer potentially a 20% bonus of density on that parcel. Reason that we're proposing this is rather than the city operating like a housing authority, which we don't have the staff and resources to do, this would put either a deed restriction or some of the covenant on the property that the owner or the manager would be able to administer rather than the city. And it is something that can be built into a project fairly easily through site plan and design review process.
How do you assure when somebody builds, gets bonus 20% that they're not going to, increase those rents to a point that they're no longer affordable over time.
Yeah, we'll have to think about that as a mechanism and how we monitor it. That's going to be one of the challenges. There are some legally binding instruments that you can draft that are part of a private CC&R potentially, that they would record, and the city would oversee that those are recorded. But this needs work as far as getting it to be legally doable and enforceable. The other potential option here is for us to partner with Clackamas Housing Authority, because they have offered their services in helping us manage these types of projects if they're located in the city, as part of their current administration. So that would potentially be an option as well. But it's an implementation thing that will need some work. So in the commercial and mixed-use zones, no changes proposed. Multifamily design standards would be simplified with this. Currently, we have some pretty complicated, what we call modulation and articulation requirements. So the intent of those is to break up a big, long box. If you have a very large building that's over 100 feet long, these standards kick in and require that you bump out the walls, create some architectural interest there. We would still require that, but it wouldn't be as onerous as it is now, because you could have change in materials, windows, or you could do articulation if you want to, but the idea here is to simplify the design process. There are other site design standards that also provide interest, such as landscaping and outdoor seating areas and things that make that project attractive on the exterior of the site. So those are things that are being considered and put forward as well. The other thing that we're no longer considering requiring is a mix of unit types. This is, when we say unit types, we're talking about numbers of bedrooms in each unit. And that's currently the case. Once you get over 50 units, we require that you mix those up into different bedrooms. But this is largely market driven. If a developer wants to build an apartment that has 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, that they are going to build the apartment that makes sense as far as numbers of bedrooms goes. And it's not something that the city is really in a position, we're not having problems with people being priced out of apartments because there's too many bedrooms in there. So I don't think that's something that the city is currently needing to regulate anymore, and our consultants confirm that.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Is the city considering popping in low-income housing in some of these larger areas? A couple units here and there.
Well, what do you mean by low income? In terms of, you would know that the tenant was low income or?
Low-income tenants.
Yeah. Like I said, we don't have the staff and resources to really administer that type of program. To the extent that we can affect that is through diversity in unit types and existing zoning. Affecting, the income side of the equation, subsidizing housing or monitoring Section 8 housing and that kind of thing. The Housing Authority already does that in Clackamas County. And they actually do own properties, even single-family properties throughout the city, and can administer that type of program. So that's not something that's within the scope of our project, though. Yeah.
They have, but they're also, I heard, there's that substantially large low-income housing along Holcomb that they're now
Holcomb,
thinking
right.
of getting rid of,
Yeah.
and removing all those people and relocating them somewhere else.
Yeah, so Chuck Robbins is on our project advisory team, and he's with the Housing Authority Community Development, and they've talked about that. I know that they're committed to you know, what do they say? Relocating everybody that's in those, they would be first in line for any new program. I don't know, there's a lot of work to be done as far as the redevelopment of that site goes. They are very interested in doing a master plan for that site. And there's a lot of private developers out there who are interested in that site. And there is potential to keep it at an affordable level. I know that the City Commission has expressed interest in that. And that's something that, you know, the planning department has not yet seen a concrete proposal for yet, because the housing authority is still wrapping up the disposition of the one property. But the land there is pretty underbuilt, obviously. Those units were built, according to Chuck, in the 40s and are really not safe or fit to live in. The cost of maintenance on those units is really just overwhelming the housing authority now. So they can do more from what I've heard, they can do more as far as affordability by selling that property and, you know, putting that money into other units under Section 8 than hanging on to that property right now. And that is a huge project before it moves forward. So that's basically a very quick and dirty part. The thing that we're starting to tackle now is the one that's probably of interest to you guys. As far as the transportation impact of this, there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know how many additional units would be constructed because we don't have an adopted set of standards yet. But as we move forward through the adoption process, we are going to have to get an approved transportation impact analysis that would be independently scoped with Oregon Department of Transportation, Metro, and the county. We've just started to look at what that would look like. We need to talk to ODOT and to see how that would look and how it would affect the existing city infill areas versus the new annexation areas. I think the biggest impact of these would potentially be in the concept plan areas, because there's the potential to build whole new developments with these regulations in mind. So you could pre-design a subdivision to have accessory dwelling units, kind of like the ones along Glen Oak Road that are designed that way, and that sort of thing. We're not proposing to rezone any annexation areas beyond what they would normally be rezoned under our current comprehensive plan. And the biggest issue for the city as far as getting this passed through the ODOT is meeting the transportation planning rule. And that's why we're going to need to do a scope and have them look at that. We need to make some assumptions based on what our economic consultants are telling us as to what the feasibility of someone adopting, how many of these are going to be built, basically, and is that impact any more than what an existing single-family home would be, considering household sizes? Household sizes are declining. We're no longer looking at a traditional five-person household. The average is about two people per household now. And then the demographics changing as well. So that's going to be part of it. But we'll be bringing that back to you as we move forward and talking through the scope of work as well. These are some of the procedural and design requirements that we were looking at as well. Annexation, currently we have the zoning defaults to the lowest density zone. That's not going to change. So if you annex in a low density, the default zone is going to be R10, 10,000 square foot lot. That's our lowest density zone. And an applicant or a developer, if they want a higher zone, they have to apply for it and justify it. Make sure that the public facilities can serve it. Currently, we allow lot averaging, given strange parcel sizes and the topography of Oregon City. This is something that is necessary to have flexibility. Staff and the development community has used this. What it means is some of your lots can be 20% smaller than the minimum lot size as long as the remaining lots balance it out and there's an average of lot size throughout that neighborhood.
I thought you guys are changing that to 10%.
It was 10%, but the city commission changed it and adopted 20. Yeah, so that's what's been adopted. Yeah, so that there's the same flexibility in the current ordinance as there was in the past.
Up to what percentage? 25% of the units can be undersized?
They didn't keep that provision. So basically it's applicable across the entire subdivision because it would have been really, really hard to figure that out. They did keep, you cannot include land under a power line easement as part of that averaging. That was the biggest takeaway from that. The other thing, site plan design review, I've talked about. And as far as emergency shelters, this includes warming shelters or community service needs. Some of these are going to be, a lot of these are associated with churches and religious land uses. The idea here is that emergency shelters that are associated with a faith-based organization or a nonprofit organization would be permitted use rather than a conditional use. What we've been doing as a city is suspending the zoning code through emergency resolutions when the temperature drops below 33 degrees. And that is a lot of burden. It requires a lot of last minute action by the staff and by the fire department and the building official and the city commission in order to do this. So with some pretty basic guidelines, the same guidelines that are written into the emergency ordinances, this is pretty much a no-brainer in terms of serving the most needy in the population when the temperature gets low. The idea here is that emergency shelters would be permitted up to a longer time period than 30 days. You could do this potentially up to 90 days and possibly even permanently. However, we're talking about you having to have services. It has to be administered by a nonprofit or by the faith-based organization or church. And there's some discussion about should there be a cap on the number of beds in these facilities or not. So that's something that we're going to be hashing out. It's not set in stone yet by any stretch of the imagination. But the idea is to facilitate these as permitted uses in the mixed use zones and as conditional use in the R3.5 zone. Those would be the options. And this is a list of all the things that are not within the scope of this project. And as you can see, it's a fairly long list. It's definitely an important list, and it's something that even our project advisory team, and especially our project advisory team, wants to keep on the radar as we move forward. They include regulation of short-term rentals. Do we want to do that? Would that have an effect? Do short-term rentals, affect housing prices and affordability? Do they drive out needed housing in existing neighborhoods? We're not updating system development charges with this proposal because that's such a complicated issue, and we don't know at this point what impact new unit types are going to have on the physical infrastructure of the city. But we do already have accessory dwelling units on that list. We have duplexes and other things like that. So SDCs might not change a whole lot in the future. But it is one of the things that, it was one of the first things that people say is an issue for them when they're contemplating building a unit like this. But we also have to think about our infrastructure and paying for it and making the person who's developing pay their fair share of it. Engineering standards are a whole other thing. We're not tackling that. Single room occupancies are a pretty complicated thing. It sounds very simple, but it has to do with basically communal facilities in an existing hotel or multifamily where not each unit has its own kitchen. They're all sharing a kitchen, they're sharing a bathroom and that kind of thing. Currently not a permitted use and not even discussed in our zoning code. So it's something that has many legal implications beyond just zoning. So we're not doing that. Tiny homes are currently not well described in building codes. They're somewhere between an RV, a manufactured home, and an accessory unit. So until the building code is figured out on these, it doesn't make sense for the zoning code to tackle it. Once the building code does address tiny homes, we can certainly write code to allow them. But right now they would be forced to be either an RV, which you can't do currently under current zoning. You can't live in an RV on a single family zone. If we call it an accessory dwelling unit, it's subject to being put on a foundation and hooked up to sewer, paying system development charges. Those are all the things that people who advocate for tiny homes don't want to do. So where's the compromise there? We're not making any zoning map amendments yet. And then all of the other things that you see here having to do with basically management of housing that is affordable is something that we will need to tackle as part of a separate project. So it's fairly limited in scope, but it does what the grant intended, which was to look at the existing zoning code and as much as we can reduce barriers to these new unit types. And I think it has great potential. It's pretty ambitious. We want to right-size it for Oregon City, and our feeling with this is that it's the right set of code amendments at the right time. The next steps for us are June 19th, we have a final advisory team meeting. As I mentioned, we're going to be scoping for our transportation analysis. This summer, we're drafting our findings. We'll start hearings in the fall, and we hope to adopt in November. We have a project website and a mailing list, so we do encourage people to still sign up for this. And if you have any questions about any of this, I'm happy to answer them.
Answer or address?
Address. I'm not sure I can answer everything.
Obviously, I have lunch.
Go.
Okay. One of the things that I was wondering about, simply because I know the house I live in used to be a duplex. Is there any thought given to allowing a single family to be subdivided within as living units within the existing footprint?
Yes, that would be, depending on what zone you're in, you could do an internal conversion, which would allow you to do that. And there would be no size limitation on that. You would have to meet the building code for fire separation and water flow and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Meet the building codes for the allowable change.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is it going to, I'm sorry, you brought up a question for me. Is it going to require or set requirements that do the opposite? So let's say you have a house that's a duplex and you go, I want to make it a single.
Single? Yeah, that's probably way easier.
I'll invite you to come look at my house.
occupancy on a, they're going to be the same type of occupancy either side because they're both considered residential occupancies. I'm not a building code expert, but, I think.
It was great fun converting converting the electrical system and the heating systems.
Yeah. So there's that option, depending, if you were a corner lot, potentially you can do, a duplex and that sort of thing. And then accessory dwelling units as well are allowed to be attached. So depending on how much living area you have in your existing house, that's an option as well. There's very little difference really between an internal conversion and an attached accessory dwelling unit, as long as you're not scraping off the house to do it, so, yeah.
This one I know is not being addressed because I saw it, but as a future item to address, when you're dealing with the traffic impact issues of the new developments, is there any way to include impacts on places that are not adjacent or near the development? I'm thinking about when is access to the hospital not going to function? When is access to McLaughlin not going to function? Those things are not currently addressed that I see anywhere.
Right. In terms of certain intersections?
Well, not necessarily certain intersections, but just the routes and what needs to be, for example, the backup on McLaughlin at trying to get onto to 205.
Right.
That seems to be, would be getting worse.
Yeah. So those types of things happen when there's a rezoning. Obviously, when you make a map change and that sort of thing. They could also happen if during the initial pre-application conference, we send notice to everybody, ODOT, Clackamas County, and if they determine that there is going to be a significant effect on an intersection based on a development proposal, they can require that we address transportation planning rule. The thing is, individual building permits would not be subject to that. So in order for these code changes to pass, we have to analyze that now, make some assumptions about it, and get that scope of work looked at by ODOT and Metro and some determination made.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to get to is
They're going to
that,
pay impact fees.
is that almost everybody needs to get across the river.
Yeah.
And there's only a very limited space to be able to do it. And sooner or later, they're not going to be able to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that all ties back to the transportation system plan and what kinds of assumptions we originally made when we did the modeling for the entire region. And that was based not just on housing growth, but job growth and where people are commuting today and what they predict will happen in the future. That's not my area of expertise, but that's what we rely on. Does that modeling take into account this type of zone change?
I don't think so.
Yeah, this type of ordinance change, and I think regionally we're just asking the early questions as Oregon City, in Portland. I don't know if they're even looking at this, but we are. So we need to address that. Yeah.
How do you guys, do you guys feel confident that the changes that you're proposing will make the housing more affordable?
I can't answer that. My hope is that we'll have some impact. Until we get down the road, and I've heard builders say they would definitely take advantage of certain zone changes, zoning code amendments here, especially to do with cluster housing and corner lot duplexes. That could make the difference for them as far as making a project pencil or not. Because right now, if you build a house on a corner lot that has no street improvements, for example, you have to put in sidewalk along two sides of both streets, right? And that's an expense for some builders, and they'll walk away from it for that reason. If you have a duplex, potentially that makes the difference for somebody to build two units where you could build one and still make it a viable project for a builder in that situation. So I have confidence that in those individual situations, then somebody would certainly look at that, and it could make the difference between a profit and a loss for them. Because this is going to, it's going to be driven by the builders. And that could also be said for accessory dwelling units and internal conversions if we allow more than one per lot. Currently, it's only one per housing unit. If we allowed up to two, then that would make the difference for them as well, I think those are the kinds of incentives that really need to be there if we want to see this stuff happen. And we're asking, that's what we're asking for.
I guess the expectation is that when you have a duplex, instead of selling that house at $500,000, he would be selling two houses at $300,000 each, or duplex at $300,000, and that's still more affordable than $500,000.
Yeah.
Now he makes some money.
The impact of this will be very difficult to monitor, and it's going to be very long term. But what we're thinking is we're transitioning to a new permit database this week. We're using Energov, and we have the means to track any new housing unit. And if we say this unit type is directly related to the code changes that we made, we can track it and see how many units are actually being built. That's what we're going to be able to do fairly easily. The type of data that we won't be able to track is what is that owner charging as rent? What is he asking for housing, for asking price on that house, if it's a sale. Unless we go out and Google it, something like that. Yeah.
I think you had more questions, Henry?
I'm done.
I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Would Habitat for Humanity be able to be part of this program?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, any nonprofit organization that has an interest in developing a new housing development in Oregon City, they come to the table with their idea, their financing, their approach in mind. That's not something we know about. But if they say, I'll give you an example. The Juneberry Lane, which is 12 housing units that were constructed on Morton Road. They're run by Proud Ground, which used to be Clackamas Housing Trust. They operate that as a land trust, which is not something that's regulated by the city, but that land trust holds all the land equity, and then the owners are able to build equity in that unit over time. It's an interesting housing model. Habitat for Humanity helps with the construction and subsidizes the building materials and the sweat equity and the labor, So those are all possibilities, and I would encourage them to come to Oregon City. But
You addressed a little bit about SDCs. Mm-hmm. I think that, although we don't really want to, maybe some brakes on SDCs would encourage some developers to maybe get involved in this.
Part of what we're thinking about is with our cost estimator, which we'll be showing people at the next project advisory team meeting. The SDCs will be right there as part of your cost estimation. You'll have some soft costs for consultants, you'll have building permit fees, you'll have system development charges. We talked a little bit about should SDCs be more scalable to different square footages of units, and that sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, it really comes down to how many cars they have, what's their physical impact on the infrastructure, rather than square footage. So it's definitely a complicated issue, and it's something that requires some deep analysis before we go there. Yeah.
Have you yet had any developers express interest in taking part in this project?
Well, we have several architects, builders, and developers on the project advisory team. Todd Island, Ray Crisp. We have some multifamily. We have Clackamas Northwest Housing Alternatives, who are developers of regulated affordable housing. They're part of our advisory team as well. And we have I think we have about 300 people on our mailing list right now from various groups. And so I think the word is out. Right now, we are in the last 2 days of our third survey. So I would encourage anybody who hasn't, we've got an online survey that is talking about these code amendments. It takes about 10 minutes to fill out. Please go online and fill that out if you haven't. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Yeah.
The cluster housing, you got to hit the open space requirement and all of that, but you could be at twice the density.
That's correct.
That's the proposal,
Yeah.
right?
So, yeah.
Okay. Other than that one, for a new development, the calculation as far as the maximum and minimum number, the 80%
Yeah.
thing, those calculations don't change in this.
Yeah, well,
proposal?
if you choose cluster housing, the idea is that code section kicks in and
Okay.
supersedes everything.
Other than cluster housing,
Right.
your density calculations for an R10 subdivision or an R8 subdivision are
Oh,
going
yeah,
to
those are
stay the same.
No, yeah, they're the same.
Okay, so like the ones off of Glen Oak Road,
Yeah.
could you hit the density number and then add ADUs?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't even talk about this. That was a planned unit development.
Okay.
It was a negotiated zone, if you will. That's not something that we have in the current code, but we are contemplating bringing it back. We're calling it residential master plan, essentially the same concept. If you have an innovative project which has slightly higher density, but which offers something in the way of amenities, it's got good design, it's got integrated housing units that are really well designed and built into the development already, we would offer two paths. You can either go type 2, standard, clear and objective, or you could go residential master plan and go to the planning commission and ask them for approval. And that's a public hearing and it's more discretionary. So in Oregon, you have to offer the clear and objective path, and you have to offer the discretionary path as well for somebody who wants to do something like that. To date, what we had is called the master plan, but it wasn't really tailored toward residential development because we got rid of PUDs back in 2004 for multiple reasons.
Were you here when that happened?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anybody on the planning staff that was?
Yeah, virtually all of them were, except me. Yeah, so.
Okay. I'd love to talk to somebody
Yeah,
sometime
there were
about
many reasons.
why that went away.
Well, there were appeals associated with them from the developers, and that wasn't the only reason. They were very discretionary, and the hearings were somewhat drawn out. So,
I can imagine.
yeah.
That's probably a discussion for another
Ultimately,
time.
they result in some really innovative stuff, when you think about it, but, good open space or better open space and some more diversity in units. And I think that's really what they were going for.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks. Hope I answered most of your questions. If you didn't, please bug me later. Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pete.
Pete?
Item 5C, Public Works Report.
Did you give him a kiss?
I did.
So, let's let's see, some of you might remember, some of you might have never realized, but in the summertime, we skip a couple meetings for the Transportation Advisory Committee. Some of our regulars probably count on that. So just know that it's not our intent to meet in July and August with the exception of the National Night Out. And so I'm assuming, and I think I've already put a bug in Amy's ear, that we would, Amy and actually the library, that we would kind of do a group booth, if you will. So I don't know if that's still the desire. I haven't heard anything from Bob or Henry on that, but for the National Night Out event.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, works.
If there's anything in particular you want us, we've done the Drive Safe campaign. We've had those kind of available. We don't have really anything quite like that, although we still have some stickers and things. So we can have those. For the neighborhood, they like to have their neighborhood maps. And so we usually bring, information on our speed hump policy and our stop sign policy. Those kind of things are usually there. We usually have some giveaways, which people like. So I don't know, I haven't put much thought into that yet, but I guess we'll just work on that and figure out what we might need, and we'll probably need.
Do you know what the date of that is?
The 7th of August.
Yeah, August 7th.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a fun evening if the weather's good and not too hot.
That's a Wednesday, isn't it?
Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday, I think.
I don't know.
You can all bring me birthday presents.
Is that your birthday? Oh, that would be pretty cool to have you sit in a booth while it was your birthday. We would probably sing to you or something.
Maybe we can get you to sit in that booth where they throw balls and fall in the water.
Last year you did that kind of
That
with
might
the
hurt my
CIC, right?
Yeah.
And there's interest in doing that again.
Yeah, I think so. And,
There is.
And
It came up at our last CIC meeting.
oh, good.
Who on the committee would like to, who on the committee would like to volunteer to help maintain that booth? Besides me.
I wish I could, but I'm not going to be in the country.
Oh, you could come for that. Jeez.
Bob, I may be available.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, that puts me for sure, perhaps John, hopefully John. And if anybody else wants to stop by and help,
Feel free, huh?
yeah.
All right, well, we'll keep working in that direction, and just know that we're still here, so if you need a Transportation Advisory Committee kind of a task, you can always reach us whether we meet or not, so we'll help you with that. We included a pretty lengthy but well-written letter from Cindy Reining, and we included that in the packet. She's basically making some suggestions about the intersection of 15th and Washington. And I think some of that may have been inspired by some of the backup there associated with the construction that we had recently on 15th and Washington. We're not done with 15th and Washington, by the way. They finished the storm work there, but we still got to move back in with the paving. And we've got our paving contractors under contract. I haven't seen have you seen if they've worked in that project into their schedule yet?
They have not incorporated into the schedule, but they are planning to submit that to us next week.
Okay. So we'll be back in there with paving really between where they ended on 15th, which was just a little bit west of Washington, and then they'll take it all the way to the curb returns on 99E there. So that'll take probably the worst section of road that we have in town to the best section of road that we have.
My wife will be so happy.
Yeah, it's. I think we dig that all out, don't we? Or we cement treat it, or we do something significant there. That will, we've finally got all the utilities, gas, water, stormwater, sewer. We're done in that stretch. And so it's taken us a while to get there, but anyway, that's moving. But this letter is basically suggesting a couple of things. Right now, that signal is set up for a more of what we call permissive phasing. So so if you're on 15th Street and you have the green light, really the turning vehicles opposing turns happen, and what she's suggesting is we should let one go and then set a different phase and let the other side go. And so I think, I'm not sure that necessarily is what we would recommend in terms of just efficiencies of moving traffic. It might help with some of the safety problems that we've seen at that intersection, but it definitely takes out all the efficiencies we see. Because it would require more time for 15th and less time for Washington, and there's so much more traffic on Washington. So I don't know if you guys read the letter at all, but the other concern that she had was the concern that we've also witnessed, which is if you're headed eastbound on 15th, and so you're coming from Main Street and you're heading kind of towards the hospital, you get to the intersection with Washington, and it's wide enough there to where people want to get between the through lane and the auto shop and make a right turn there. And her thought was that we were going to go ahead and stripe that to permit that, and it's not our intent to do that. We striped it a couple of years ago, I think. We had that striped with a pretty obvious edge line so that folks would be less likely to do that, but I suspect there's still some cheaters that are doing it. So my thought was, if anything, we might ask police to enforce it a little bit more. But
Can you put like those, some sort
Type
of,
1 delineators?
yeah,
we probably could. I haven't looked at the entrance to the, but yeah, we probably could do something a little bit more than no
kind of
stripe.
prevent that
Prevent
without
that.
having police to,
Yeah,
how often are they gonna be down there?
yeah,
Maybe the bots dots.
yeah. Those kind of things we could do more of, but not until kind of after we're done building.
Finish with the work.
Yeah, we'll take another look at that. And I think her questions about timing in checking with the county, one thing that you may not know about, but not only are we putting a signal at 12th and Washington, but Martin and the county and Dana kind of all work together to get interconnect conduits from that signal at 12th and Washington. It'll go to 14th and Washington, 15th and Washington. And I think there's already existing conduits to Abernathy. So we're going to connect those intersections, which will give us the opportunity to phase the timing along that corridor a lot better.
And that corridor will be the first fully connected corridor, and we could theoretically take it as far out as Prairie Schooner with some additional work in the future.
So,
Well, she certainly put some effort into that, didn't she?
she did. I thought, she really put a nice letter together, and I'll circle back with her with a little more information we got from the county. There was a recommendation for maybe a sign that would better inform the drivers on 15th about when they could make that left safely and when they shouldn't make that left safely. But I think beyond that, for now, it's not our intent, first of all, to allow the right-hand turn to occur like she was thinking we might. And then it's just, but I don't think we'd move at this point in time to, dedicated phases for each turn movement off of 15th.
Once you interconnect them, do you have a ability then to somehow improve efficiency?
Yep.
And look the traffic flows and be able to make adjustments?
Yeah, we will. I mean, right now, to be honest with you, we met with the county when we did 15th because we wanted to adjust the signal timing so that the detour route would work a little bit better. And to be quite honest, those signals and their controllers are, they're the programmable controllers that adjust to traffic flow. So if you've got traffic that's sitting backed in a particular movement for more than a couple of cycles, then the signal is smart enough to know to give them a little bit more green time, maybe 5 to 10 seconds at a bump. And then if traffic is still sitting there in the queue for more than one cycle, it'll give them a little bit more time. So those are pretty dynamic controllers.
The whole thing gets very busy because even before this construction, sometimes in the morning I run through there and it backs up past the bridge and, towards the county maintenance offices and
Right.
towards the railroad. I mean, it just takes time to get through there.
Yeah, one of the things that, we've been looking at with the I-205 and the desire for some interchange improvements at 99E and I-205, I look pretty regularly at the mapping software, and that area right there at 15th and 14th, Washington and Main Street, 9090, that's a kind of a big red spot down there at peak hour. So it's a busy spot, moves a lot of traffic, and when we shut one of those legs, it really gets kind of problematic for us, right? So, yeah, it's a busy area.
It seems to me from watching some of it is that you're getting some 213 traffic coming down and taking the old bridge and then heading out toward Wilsonville and Tualatin and trying to avoid the signals and some mess that's on the bridge, on Abernathy Bridge.
Well, I done that myself.
Yeah.
If I'm going down to Wilsonville, I would avoid getting on 205. At the end of the day, it doesn't really make any sense.
But
yeah, rather than sit
But you just,
it feels better. You're moving maybe a little faster, right? But
well, you are kind of moving faster.
imagine if they had a toll station on Abernathy Bridge, and
Oh
we'd
my
see a lot
God.
more of that.
Oh my God.
And that was one of the points I've been trying to point out is that, we could be really hurting if they do that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I'll move to the mountains.
Good luck. Even that's congested.
Yeah.
All right, so if we're done with that one, I'll move on to the next item. Is that the 20-mile-per-hour one?
Oh, while you're moving along, how far behind are we on the 12th Street light?
I'm sorry?
How far behind are we on the 12th Street light?
Well, PGE is supposed to be out there tomorrow, so we are behind because of, we're waiting for the overhead utilities to get out of the way. So it's unfortunate because that contractor's incurring some costs that he intended to get that done by now. So,
When I had that problem, I finally had to call up one of the telephone companies and tell them I'd go out and saw the pole down for them if it'd help. They did come out finally.
we sent him a picture with me and a pair of loppers and said, better come and we're going to cut these. So we brought this topic a couple of times to you in various forms. We've got to move it forward, I think, and get it in front of the city commission. So I just got bumped off of the July work session, but we're going to try and hit a June work session with the city commission on this idea of finding or designating certain areas as 20 mile per hour. But what I'll go through today is just some of the things that we've come up with as concerns for where we might elect to designate some of these routes as family-friendly routes. So that's what this is about. So this ORS 810 was something that came about in 2011 with House Bill 3150 that adopted this and gave cities the authority to designate streets something less than 25 miles per hour. These are some of the conditions that come along with that ORS. They need to be located in a residential district. The amount of vehicles per day needs to be 2,000 or less. The 85th percentile speed needs to be 30 miles less than 30 miles per hour. And we would have to post traffic control devices that indicate that those routes are something different than what we would see in a residential street. So something that suggests slower traffic and an indication of maybe bikes sharing the lane, like what we do with the Sharrows, which is the graphic on the left. And then the pedestrian and bicycles in the roadway shared with vehicles, which is kind of what we've come up with the symbol in the middle there. And then, obviously the speed limit signage, and we've talked about using kind of a family-friendly sign topper or rider that goes along with that speed limit sign. So that combined with several other things that we think need to happen just to make it a family-friendly route are kind of where we're headed. So some of the other things that we've talked about are, and we'll go through some good examples of this, but are sidewalks ADA compliant? Do they have trip hazards? Are there sidewalks at all? And we found several that have sidewalks, but mailboxes right in the middle of the sidewalks. So, things that might take a street that meet these conditions, but don't meet other conditions. Is there street lighting along that corridor, or adequate street lighting, or does it need to be supplemented? Those kind of things. So we've done quite a bit of work on a few of our corridors, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But this is a map out of our transportation system plan. If you remember, we had kind of agreed to look first at the family-friendly streets. And so the lines on this, so this map shows all of our land use zones, and there's not a legend on here, so I can't tell you what all the various colors mean in terms of specifics, but generally yellow is residential and some of the other colors are more of a commercial or industrial, and then the tan is a little bit more like mixed use. But the key for this map is just these purple lines, the transportation system plan. So this is a map out of the transportation system plan, and the purple lines were family-friendly routes that were likely to be funded. The solid purple lights were likely to be funded. The dashed lines in purple were what we designated as unlikely to be funded. If you remember, we've updated our transportation SDCs, and we've included some dollar amounts for both the likely to be funded streets. Those were always in, but now we've added to that list of SDC funded projects the not likely to be funded streets. So we're collecting SDC revenues is what I'm trying to say for these projects. So they're a good place to start. We, in many instances, will have funding available. Obviously, that's a 20-year plan when we collect all those SDCs, so it's not like it's going to happen overnight unless we pass some kind of a bond measure like the city of West Linn did to help fund some of their transportation improvements. But we think we can take them on over time and make them more comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists. Okay.
John, I just want to mention my son saw a 20-mile-an-hour school sign at the high school, and he was really happy that you guys put that in.
Yeah,
You've
that
seen
was
he noticed some behavior changes.
and that came through the Transportation Advisory Committee as well.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, and my son noticed that, and he's already talked to some of his friends and noticed some behavioral changes.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Thank you for mentioning that. So, Martin and I, together with Matt Polison and Dana Webb, have been doing field trips, which is kind of a neat thing to do. We don't get in a car very often together and actually have a chance to talk about, signage, streets, or whatever. So we've only done it twice now, right? But we've gone out and looked at, I think, 5 different street sections and spent a little bit of time out in the field together. And, really Dana has kind of corralled all that with some informational worksheets that we kind of work through and talk about in the different kind of field conditions for 5 streets that we looked at. And, we look at what's the ADT on those streets? Do we have speed information? Some of the family-friendly streets, surprisingly, we don't collect speed data on, or we haven't been in our 3-year cycle of collecting speed data. So we will be collecting data for those streets that we don't have information on. But I think for the most part, we're finding a lot of these streets are under the number of vehicles that's required of the ORS. We're looking at pavement condition, and do we have a paving project there, or is the pavement in poor shape or in good shape? Should we, maybe if it's one of the designated routes, maybe we need to focus a little more attention to the pavement on that in the upcoming years. We've looked at the sidewalks, do sidewalks exist or are they ADA compliant? Everything from, trip hazards to sightline concerns, those kind of things we look at. And then there's just kind of this other larger category that talks to all kinds of things, which is, are there any, it may be designated in the TSP, but it really doesn't take into consideration whether there's any real points of interest. Is there a school or is there a park or is there a trailhead? Is there a bus route, somewhere along the route or at the ends? How good is the street lighting? Does it need to be enhanced? So quite a few other indicators that we're trying to kind of evaluate in our field visit and kind of talk through so that we can draw some conclusions. And again, it's interesting because it forces you to kind of take a much closer look at some of these streets that we may not look at very often. And one of them is right there. So we found good candidates and not so good candidates for, even though they're family friendly, some of these streets that we looked at are really several $1,000s worth of capital away from being able to actually be considered a family friendly street, right? We can't just throw up some signs and striping and call them family friendly, in our opinion. So one of those that was, we just talked about today with the school district was Bell Court, which kind of runs parallel with Lynn Avenue. It's a side street, it's a neighborhood street. There's a pathway that comes onto one end of it near Singer Park and leads all the way across Holmes Lane in front of Gardner Middle School. So it does kind of lend itself to something that you'd like to see better, more useful for pedestrians and bicyclists, in the sense of a safe route to school. But that particular street has got no sidewalks. It's I would say middle to maybe lower income housing. And because of that, we see a lot of cars parked right on the shoulder of the roadway. And so it's real narrow. Even the travel lanes get encroached upon by vehicles that are parked along the edges, and limited, lots of things, limitations on street lighting and
Limited sidewalk, limited sight line angle. One of the big questions was, and we talked about it briefly, is what is the reason this street would be a family-friendly route? Is it a connector between 2 points of interest? Is it trying to bridge some sort of deficiency in terms of interconnectivity? Bell Court really wasn't a great example for any of the criteria we're looking for.
And yet, that's the one that's going to cause us a problem when Gardner's built.
Well, but the thing is, where does Bell Court lead to from Gardner Middle School?
Holmes Lane, and
No, it leads to Singer Creek and to a park that kids can't go through to connect out to anything but Lynn Avenue.
But I think what we're saying now is we're looking for some of those that are a little bit easier to implement and get moving. We're not suggesting that it wouldn't ever be a candidate for family-friendly street, but in order to get there, it's going to take more than just some of the things that we're seeing on some of those other projects that are more like in the forward category. So Jackson Street between 5th and 17th, lots of striped crossings, sidewalks on both sides of the street. We fixed through our pavement management program most of the pavement problems, but also all the ADA ramps, good street lighting, and if not, easily supplemented. It's got the pool along it, it's got a bus route. In fact, out of all of them, that was the one street that seemed like, man, we could get this together with a couple of ADA ramp.
3 sign changes and 2 ADA ramp improvements, and we could get from 17th to 5th signed.
And it serves a swimming pool.
And it serves as
Well, it's
swimming
not
pool.
just the swimming pool, school, the
Case
bus
High
route
School.
that's there.
There's a park.
Yeah, 2 parks that technically it connects. The harder part is the other leg from 5th to 7th. So that section of Jackson we have not done as much capital improvement on. It needs some ADA work on that block, those 2-3 blocks But Matt's already started targeting the road for some internal maintenance, trying to make some improvements out there, and then trying to see what we can do internally in terms of some of those other deficiencies next year without having to enter it into the pavement contract, into the pavement program.
I think this is kind of great. I mean, low hanging fruit. You go after it and, make those small changes that make a big difference. Some of these other ones, they're capital drains, and I think you almost have to have some sort of capital project in there to justify.
I think everything that you see in the not good candidates, while they serve the purpose of being in the TSP as family-friendly routes, and for the logic that they follow for those designations, it'd be great to meet the criteria that we've set out would require some capital improvement projects.
Woodlawn was on that kind of not good project list, partially because it's long sight distances, it's slow traveled. There's no sidewalks on it. Yes, we could spend some dollars to put that in a more family-friendly category that kind of would be moving forward. But it also seemed like there wasn't a need right there, right? It didn't seem like if you wanted to walk, you felt pretty comfortable on that roadway because it's a wider pavement section. It's, got long, the right-of-way is clear, so there's not a lot of encroachment there. So as a pedestrian, even with pushing a stroller or something like that, it didn't seem like there was much justification for it. It didn't have good street lighting, but so we just kind of pushed it out into the kind of the not such a good candidate. Part of the reason I think is, we do need, for every one of these that we select, we need the city commission to adopt an ordinance to designate it that way. And so we want to make sure what we bring to the city commission makes sense to us too. And because, I think some people support this, others maybe not so much. So we want to be careful about that. But there were some others on the list. The Kenema neighborhood, we actually didn't do a drive-through, but there was that McLaughlin-Kenema trail plan that put a lot of energy into that. So we were hoping to kind of follow that plan and work on implementation of that in the Kenema neighborhood. Because that kind of is that neighborhood is what kind of spurred some of this discussion on the 20 mile.
And John, quick question. I don't recall, was family-friendly something was mandated in our transportation plan, or is that something that's strictly a local option?
The way I recall it was family-friendly was a designation that we could use to help justify some of these kind of improvements and putting them on the list. So the intent was to make our neighborhoods more walkable and more available. And so the family-friendly, just like the likely to be funded and unlikely to be funded, were kind of terms that the state and the industry was using. They're not, quote, mandated.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And most of the family-friendly routes that are in the TSP, they follow very closely with the Parks Trail Master Plan for just interconnectivity. So I think at least I believe, a lot of the family-friendly routes were adopted based on information that was derived from that plan back from 2008.
The intent is to make the neighborhoods a little more connected from key points. And yeah, Trails Master Plans were one of the indicators for that.
I like these that you're going to move forward simply because you need to show some success in order to move it into the rest of the city.
Yeah.
And these will do it.
So again, I don't have much more to present. So commission in August in their work session, we'd like to take, shortly thereafter, ordinance for at least these 3 locations. I don't know if we're going to do that one at a time or all in one ordinance, but
You have to make those improvements before, or you have to get designation first before you can make those improvements?
I don't know that one needs to happen before the other, but I think an ordinance that designates it, especially so Front Avenue, for instance, again, it's pretty close. It's not like Jackson Street, though. There's still quite a few improvements that need to happen there. So we talked about things like finding places where you could not only put a crosswalk, but maybe do a curb extension. And then most of that neighborhood has mailboxes that are right in the middle of a 4-foot sidewalk. How that got approved, I'm not quite sure. But trying to figure out, working with the neighborhood to group those mailboxes in a ways, maybe in some of those curb extensions where they could have a nice wide spot for maybe a group mailbox instead of individual mailboxes every 100 feet that are right in the middle of your ADA accessible pathway.
I know how it happened.
What's that?
I know how it happened.
How'd it happen?
People just put them in.
Well, yeah,
In the sidewalk.
obviously somebody put them in, but
I mean, there's no code.
but we wouldn't allow that today.
I could probably.
So we don't have other neighborhoods like that or other streets like that. There's a couple of them in the old Park Place neighborhood. And I think it was back before ADA was really kind of thought much about it, but.
Well, that's why I put mine in the sidewalk. There was no place else to put it.
I could probably.
You don't have sidewalk in front of your street.
Yes, I do.
You do?
In front of my house, it was required when we built the house to put the sidewalk in.
Oh, and you put your mailbox right in the middle of the sidewalk?
Nobody asked me otherwise.
Well,
Is there
I don't know how we
is
missed
there a
that.
code?
Did you get a right-of-way permit for installing your mailbox in the sidewalk? Okay, expect a call from code enforcement.
And it's been run over 3 times.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, Bob.
Next time it gets run over, call us for a permit. We'll tell you.
I could probably help you a little bit on Front Street. That was one of my projects.
You're the one to blame.
Well, yeah, because let me put it this way. You had 50 foot of right of way and you were putting in a 2-lane street and sidewalks. And so, and the mailboxes couldn't go out past the curb. The front of the mailboxes can't go out past the front of the curb.
You had 50 feet of right of way. Why'd you only sidewalk one side?
Well, because it was supposed to go on 2 sides.
Yeah, but you only sidewalked one side.
Well, again, it was restrictions.
Well, so my point is, I don't want to go into the details of the history of that street, but we have some ADA issues that don't make it very family friendly. So, but they're not like, say, Pease Road, which has got a variety of things going on with it. In order to fix that, it's a pretty big capital project to get that right. And so Front Avenue seemed like still in that category of low-hanging fruit. So we'd like to suggest that we move forward with that. Yeah, we're going to have to put it in a small capital plan to make some of those things. Like what we would suggest is more of the curb extension where you maybe lose some on-street parking, but it's on a street that doesn't really utilize much on-street parking. And, get maybe help with some of those tools can also be used with some of these, not speed cushions, but traffic, they're in our new plan.
Calming,
right? Our new
traffic calming?
Traffic calming devices, right, that are pretty useful. So, put that together with a crosswalk maybe, striped crosswalk, and just take on that kind of thing. But for the most part, still got plenty of sidewalk. If we can just get the mailboxes out of there, we can still live with the sidewalk that's there.
The one side of sidewalk.
The one side of sidewalk. Thank you very much, Henry.
We were wondering when we went through there.
Are you looking for a motion from this group to move it forward to council?
Oh,
Commission?
that'd be great, John.
So I'll move we go forward with the 3 recommended roadways.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None?
Great. Thank you. What else do we have? There's not much in terms of information or slideshows on this. I just an acknowledgement that we talked a fair amount about this Central Point speed zone and the idea of asking the state to do a speed study along Central Point. If you remember, the concern there was that we think that the neighborhood and the community generally would like to see 35 mile an hour speed zone along Central Point. Most of it is 35 mile an hour with the exception of the piece between the city limits and maybe Partlow Road. I can't quite remember, but we looked at speed data across the entire boulevard all the way from the city limits to Warner Parrott. And the interesting thing was the traffic was generally driving less than the posted 40-mile-per-hour speed limit sign in the area that's posted slower, and then they tend to speed up as they get into the city limits. I think that's because they're folks who live in the city and just, are speeding to work, but we see a lot more speeding in the section that's posted 35, right? So we were a little concerned about asking the state to do the speed study for the whole boulevard because they might raise the speed limit. And so instead we're going to ask the state to look at just the piece that's posted 45, focus on that and see if we can't get that reduced. So I would say we dropped the ball a little bit there, but we'll pick it back up again.
Could you have that kind of summarized and put on Next Door McLaughlin, or Next Door anyway? I seen a post on there about 2 weeks ago asking about this particular item.
Okay. Yep, we can do that. We'll have Kristen Brown put something on there. I hear she's got all our social media dialed in.
Yeah, they all seem to come from her.
Yep. With that, we're done, or I'm done.
Okay, does anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to have addressed?
Oh,
One other item,
are we,
construction website.
yeah, and do we need to give them a heads up on closure of South End at 2nd this weekend?
It's not this week.
Oh, it's not, when is
July
it?
7th.
Okay, well, I don't know the details of that.
So as many of you probably noticed, we kicked off construction today on the High Street water main. You can go to, there's actually a little insert here in your packet, go to our website for our construction website link, and it can give you information as to all the construction that we have going on throughout the summer. We're also updating everything over to ODOT's trip check system. So when we start construction, we'll start entering into there where we're doing construction, active construction. And then that feeds information to all of the various mapping tools that people use. So your in-dash GPS system, Waze, Google Maps, all of those. So that will hopefully help with people that are using those to kind of track where the traffic congestions are. One thing that we just submitted today and are expecting approval from the county probably next week is the biggest logistic hurdle for the High Street water main project is the construction in the intersection of South 2nd Street and High Street. Okay? You've got traffic coming off of 99, you've got traffic coming up and down South End Road, you've got traffic coming off of Center Street onto South 2nd Street to get out to 99, and then you've got traffic on High Street trying to get in any one of those three directions. So what we've implemented was we're going to allow a Saturday construction day. So the contractor believes they can get out of the intersection in an 8-hour work period. And that includes bringing up the base lift of the asphalt. If we do it on a Saturday, the likelihood of that succeeding is greater because the ADTs are significantly less. The other thing that we've done to help them is we are going to be closing South End Road, similar to how we closed it last summer when the road was sliding. What that will do is it will protect their southern perimeter, so they won't have traffic coming down South End Road, or traffic trying to go up South End Road, and then they can focus on the other two sides that will remain open. So we'll close South End Road, we'll close South 2nd between Center and High Street, and then the contractor can focus on cycling traffic either off of South Center Street, up High Street, and then back around to wherever they need to go, or off of High Street down to South 2nd Street. Basically gives them two fronts they have to deal with and two fronts that they're protected on and can function and work. Working with all those allowances, we feel, and the contractor is confident he can get out of that intersection in a single day work period.
Would it help if you closed that short street from Highway 99E that goes past
Tumwater?
the VFW hall?
Not necessarily, yeah. And incidentally, ODOT might have that closed already when they move down on their next phase of their project. So the next phase of ODOT's project, when they finish near the Kanema zone, is they're going to be moving down to that other zone that starts at the Still House and then works its way to the tunnel. While they're working in that area, they will be closing Tumwater as part of their project. So I believe that will probably be in place by the time we go to do our closure on July 7th.
But their intent is to close it permanently, by the way.
Yeah.
I would put that one on next door too, just.
So Kristen likes to do these things. She likes to do the postings for these construction delays about 3 days ahead of time. She isn't an advocate for putting it out too far ahead. I agree with her. And then we don't want it too late. So 4 to 3 days seems to be the sweet spot that, you know, she's our communication expert. I'll rely on her, and that's her preference.
I'm just thinking that's one of those things
Yeah,
that you
you're
can't
right.
have too much information out.
Yeah, we'll mention it to her because that will be a permanent closure. It'll be changed for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the Tumwater closure. I thought you were talking about the South End closure.
I'm talking about South End
Tumwater,
more.
yeah, I don't think that's.
Tumwater, I don't think is a problem. But South End, I can see it being a big problem.
Quick question, just curious. How are we done on our bids for major projects in terms of initial budget estimates? And
We have any of those?
given the fact that so much construction is going on and competition for,
So I would say we had a bit of a surprise on the water line project. So the water component of this High Street project was one that I think we underestimated on. But the rest of them we've been not necessarily, well, we're staying within the budget. It wasn't the water line, it was the pavement maintenance projects. It's the biggest pavement maintenance contract we've had in a long time. So that estimate I think was low, and we ended up getting bids that were, I don't know that they were high, they were just more than we were hoping for.
right?
But I think both the consultant world and ourselves are recognizing that. So our estimates are more on track with what the bids are. But the budget amounts are still getting tighter and tighter. So we're still staying within budget on our overall capital budget, but we're seeing that we're not going to be able to complete as much work as we had hoped. So-
I heard Clackamas County canceled theirs pavement contract.
Well, I don't think Clackamas
That's what I
County's
saw the other day.
really. So
They're not go. It was too expensive, and they're not going to do their pavement.
I haven't heard that. I know they've got signage out on Maple Lane. I don't know if anybody's
Yeah, they're
driven out
working
there.
it. They're working on a maple.
That one's almost done.
So there is some paving going on. I don't know which one they canceled, but I didn't think the county was going to do a lot of pavement maintenance. So I don't think they're doing any chip seal this year. So I don't know. We're not the only ones that are seeing, the region's seeing a need to scale back what their intentions were, just because while the economy may be really great, my wallet's not any better than it used to be. And from a agency perspective, the revenues are where they were projected to be. That's not changed. And yet the cost of building things has gone high.
I can give you 2 quick anecdotal stories. So Lisa does all of the contracts, and so we opened up bids for the High Street project. Once the bids are open and the intent to award is issued, the contractor is supposed to be trying to lock down all his unit prices and everything, but he can ask for an escalation right up until the point where he gets his notice to proceed. So that's usually about a 2-week period between, we're going to give you the contract, we're going to get it onto City Commission, then we're going to schedule our pre-construction meeting. We typically give them the notice to proceed. High Street, basically, just before the meeting started, gave us, here's an escalation on materials costs because everything's going skyrockets. And then today, I had to order some sheeting, some metal sheeting for trenching. When we have to leave a trench open in the road, we have to put over 1-inch steel sheeting over that. Steel sheeting, same size sheet, last time we bought it was about a year ago, was $3,600. Same exact sheet is $5,600 today. And two of the contractors that I normally go to won't even give me a bid because the market's so volatile, they can't get a firm cost commitment from their suppliers.
Tell you order it.
Yeah, they say, you give me a PO and I will lock down a price. I said, I can't give you a PO until you give me a price.
So yeah, it's getting more expensive out there.
And
A little dicey.
I'm glad to hear, you know, that,
and asphalt's going back up.
Oh, everything is.
yeah.
Well, with that-
I'm glad to hear somebody's doing really good in this economy, but
With that, I hope everybody has a nice summer. We'll see you in September. This meeting is adjourned.
Yes.